This is National Educational Television.
One of the happiest forms of music invented is the rondo. It goes back to the 17th and 18th century when the great French harpsichord players like Couperin and Rameau favored it in their compositions. Now here's the basic form of the rondo. You have a refrain that's invariably 8 or 16 measures long, a very happy tune. This tune comes back several times in the course of the composition and always begins and ends it. These refrains are separated by other tunes or other ideas, and the final effect, if I may use a rather irreverent comparison, is that of a three-decker sandwich or sometimes even a layer cake. Let's start with a very simple example of the rondo where you can follow very easily the idea of the opening refrain and of the intervening episodes. It's a rondino on a theme of Beethoven by the great Austrian violinist Fritz Kreisler. Let's go on to a much more highly developed rondo now. We'll take the last movement from the Beethoven Sonata in G major for violin and piano. Now, as you know, probably, the rondo usually occurs as the last movement in a major composition, and this one is no exception. This particular piece begins with a lovely tune that is reminiscent of bagpipes. There are about 4 bars on the piano that open the piece, and it goes like this. After this, the violin comes in with an entirely different tune of 4 bars, while the piano obstinately repeats the same 4 bars. Then, when the first 8 bars are over, the piano and violin seem to hit upon some compromise, and both of them play 4 bars of the same kind. After these 12 bars, we get again a 4-bar section where the violin now appropriates what the piano had played before, while the piano plays what the violin had begun with. And the whole effect is extremely charming, and I'd like you to hear it. One can't help admiring the extraordinary architectural design of this whole piece. How did Beethoven succeed in putting together exactly 4 bars every time of this and 4 bars of that? You would imagine that the whole piece would become disrupted and seem to consist of little bits here and there. But no, by the time Beethoven is through, he has made little motives out of his various themes, and the final effect is of something that is architecturally completely integrated and out of one big piece. The oboe is mostly known as an orchestral instrument, and a very important one. You easily recognize its very plaintive but penetrating sonority when it comes through in the orchestra. But there's rather lovely composition by Mozart for oboe with one violin, viola, and cello. And the oboe plays the predominant role with the three string instruments barely holding their own against the oboe. And Mozart uses here a rather interesting device known in music as the double exposure, which can be fatal in photography, but it's very useful in music because what happens is that the oboe plays the tune once, and then the string instruments get a chance to play it over again. In this way, you don't develop too much jealousy between the musicians, and you prevent sometimes wholesale massacre. There's an interesting middle section in this composition, too. In the middle section, Mozart lets the string players continue playing in a 6/8 tempo in rhythm, but the oboe goes into a 4/4 rhythm, and the two are really playing against each other. A very daring practice, unknown in the days of Mozart generally. The next piece you're going to hear is also a rondo by Mozart, but this time a rondo with a Turkish flavor. And it's not the only time that Mozart made an excursion into Turkey. I have noticed that composers generally are pretty much international snoopers. You take, for instance, Bartók, who was a Hungarian, he wrote Romanian dances. And Brahms, who was German, wrote Hungarian dances. Dvorak, who was a Czech, wrote an American quartet. And every French composer, from Debussy to Ravel to Lalo to Chabrier, has written Spanish compositions. And so on and so forth. Every composer has always been interested in what went on in another country. Well, let's get back to our Turkish rondo, though. You may be interested to know that the violin you have been hearing is a genuine Antonio Stradivarius, the most famous violin maker who ever lived. This particular instrument was made in 1727, so it's now 228 years old, and it's still almost as perfect as the day it was made. It has a very glamorous history because in 1816 it was bought by Niccolo Paganini, the fabulous Italian violin virtuoso, and he kept it to the end of his life. Paganini, of course, also had another violin, a Guarneri, which nowadays is in the museum in Genoa in Italy and cannot be heard in concert. And I feel particularly fortunate that I can let you hear this violin. This violin is the one that I also use when I play in the Paganini Quartet. And the Paganini Quartet is called Paganini because all the four players are playing on the Stradivari instruments that belong to Paganini. The second violin, for instance, is a Stradivari made in 1680. That's the oldest of the four instruments. It's now 275 years old. It's still in perfect condition. And that one, too, belonged to Paganini. Then the viola has a particularly glamorous history in that it is the instrument for which Berlioz was commissioned to write the Harold in Italy Symphony. Berlioz was the great French composer. And then the cello in that quartet was also made by Stradivari, also belonged to Paganini, and was made by Stradivari when he was 92 years old, in the year before his death. It's difficult to stay away from Beethoven for very long because he really does dominate the musical scene. As I have said before, that Beethoven was the master of the grand architectural design. When you get another composer, he'll write a beautiful long theme and then he's done with it. Take, for instance, the Unfinished Symphony of Schubert, where there's a glorious theme that goes like this. And then Schubert develops it further, of course. The tune goes on, and it's one of the loveliest ones ever written. Beethoven can do that too. But Beethoven also has a different technique, where he'll take a theme and break it up into little motives. And these little motives become like building bricks, out of which he fashions a tremendous architectural design. Now you take the Fifth Symphony, for instance, with its famous victory motive of 4 notes. These 4 notes don't even take a minute to play. They don't even take a second to play. And then this same motive comes back hundreds of times, as you will remember. Always building up the same motive over and over and over again. Beethoven does the same thing, too, in the last movement of the quartet, Opus 80, number 4, where he does this. The theme is 8 bars. But if you look more closely at this theme, it really is twice 4 bars, namely, and now the second 4 bars, throughout the piece, as you're going to hear it, you will hear this little theme come back more than 20 times. Now imagine if another composer did this. The effect would be one of repetitiousness, monotony. When Beethoven does it, you go along with him and you feel that the design is growing and growing until you find yourself in the presence of one wonderful and harmonious architectural structure.
This is National Educational Television.